Hey, Fire fans, this is Nick with the Feed the Fire podcast. And on this beautiful, sunny Chicago Monday morning, I'm going to darken your day a little bit because we have to recap the 1-0 loss to FC Cincinnati at Cincinnati. But then we'll bring the sunshine back. Let's find the silver lining around those clouds and look forward to our U.S. Open Cup matchup coming up on Tuesday against the Houston Dynamo. So let's dive right in. And we will remind you that our show is brought to you by Skira Icelandic Water, available at your local 7-Eleven. And for all the yelling at the TV this weekend, I could use a bottle right now. But anyway, as you know, the Chicago Fire traveled to Cincinnati, and it's been a grueling part of their season. Lots of away matches, playing, every 3-4 days or so between US Open Cup and MLS travel. And you are starting to see the tired legs come in. You are starting to see heavy rotations of the squad, and you're starting to see those injuries mount up on top of it. The news right before the game was that the Chicago Fire had signed Chicago Fire 2 defender Charlie Ostrem to a short-term agreement. He was available for the game at Cincinnati, and the way these short-term agreements work, just real briefly, is a club can sign a player from their affiliate team for up to 4 short-term, which means 4 days, contracts before they actually have to give him like a legitimate senior team contract here, and all the different pay rules and roster rules will kick in at that point. So he could play for the Fire for up to 16 days during the course of the season without having any of those senior roster rules kick in. And it would not surprise me one bit to see this happen to Charlie a couple more times at least, just because Tehran has been injured, Chihos has been playing hurt, and Kendall Burks, he has moments of good play and just as many moments of terrible play, if not more. Omsberg, for some reason, just doesn't seem to have the trust of Frank Klopas at this point, despite how well he played under him last season. So who knows what's going on with the Chicago Fire backline. And then you've got the wingbacks, Suke and Navarro, Seves and Dean. Dean, who is still out, nursing an injury as well, and Klopas having to rotate some formations and just can't get Suke and Navarro all going at the same time. So there's a lot going on with the Chicago Fire backline. Keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on whether or not they keep signing Charlie Ostrom to these short-term contracts, a guy who's been solid for CF2, but is he at the senior team level yet? Now let's look specifically at this Cincinnati game. It was much ado about nothing for large swaths of this game. And then Lucho Acosta gets them the goal in the 83rd minute. And that's all they needed, just that one moment, just that one goal. I mean, I was predicting a 3-1 Cincinnati blowout here. And even if you look at the expected goals, I was way off. Cincy only had 1.1 expected goals to Chicago's 0.4. But still, Cincinnati gets the win, gets the 3 points, remains atop the Shield standings. Let me repeat that. Cincinnati remains atop the Shield standings for the moment. Now, looking at that goal, it was a good counterattacking goal from Cincy. Another transition defense moment lost by the Fire, another breakdown in the back line where Cincinnati was able to play a ball across to Lucho Acosta, close range. Like he was like on the 6-yard line, and he's in a one-on-one matchup with Kendall Burks. Now, Kendall Burks, I have said, is probably the weakest center back on the roster. I've also said he probably needs just a run of minutes with the senior team, getting some game time to help him grow and develop, similar to the way that we've seen Koutsias play a little better after he gets 2-3 games in a row, similar to the way that Brian Gutierrez just needed to get a run of starts in order for him to kind of break out and play a lot better. These homegrown guys that the Fire are developing or have developed or want to develop need to get in with the senior team and need to start getting some of these minutes. Where you start to run into problems, and this goes for any Major League Soccer club, is when you have guys like Jonathan Dean, Kendall Burks, Brian Gutierrez, Yorgos Koutsias all on the pitch at the same time, and you've got 3, 4, 5 guys who need to develop, and then you only have about 4 or 5 guys who are at that MLS level, so to say. Same can be said even a little bit for Mauricio Pineda, though he's been around for a bit. So when you have all those guys on your squad, you weaken the whole of the squad, or I should say when they're all in the starting lineup, you weaken the whole of the starting lineup. That's kind of what we're seeing a little bit with the Fire. And in this case, you've got Lucho Acosta, who is one of the best players in the league right now, or at least he's playing like one of the best players in the league right now, especially the way Cincinnati's going. And he's in a one-on-one situation with your weakest center back, maybe your weakest defender, 6, 7, 8 yards out from the goal. Like, what do you think's going to happen? Part of that is preparation coming into the match. Where's Lucho Acosta going to be? How are you going to scout him? How are you going to defend him? And a lot of that, though, is just on the defense being able to shift, rotate, identify who the dangerous players are. And in this case, the Chicago Fire, in their transition defense, allow Acosta to be marked one-on-one with Burks. And Burks just freezes. I don't think he made a move. He just kind of stood in front of Acosta, and you have to react when you're in. You can't react. You have to be proactive. You have to do something, especially 6 yards out. Push him onto his disfavored foot. Body him up, try and shove him off the ball, and at least give Spencer Ritchie, who was starting in goal for a Chris Brady, who was a healthy scratch, supposedly. He's not in concussion protocol, but he wasn't even on the bench. I guess just nursing that face laceration and 14 stitches. But you got to let Spencer Ritchie then be able to read the shot. And in this case, Burks didn't do anything right in that moment, and then Acosta just blasts one. Ritchie probably should have gotten a foot on it, but goalkeepers are so used to getting down, getting their hands on the ball. This may have been an opportunity for a good kick save, but at the end of the day, when you're that close, it's hard to put it on any one player. Ritchie didn't have the best read on it, didn't make a good play on it. Burks, terrible 1v1 defending. From the defensive perspective, nobody identified where the threat was. It was a transition moment for Cincinnati, so the Fire turning the ball over, not recovering. There's a lot of things that went into this goal. It's going to fall mostly on Burks and Ritchie, but you've got to look at it as kind of a team issue. Additionally, if the team would actually been playing a little better offensively, then maybe these moments don't come for Cincinnati. Maybe Acosta is dropping deeper and not making these runs into the box. Well, anyway, let's take a quick look at the statistics here to see if it kind of matches up with this lackluster Fire performance. Now, if we're looking at the statistics per MLSsoccer.com, Chicago ended up with 48% possession, which doesn't seem too bad, but most of that is going to be in their own defensive half. If you want to look at the passing breakdowns, it is all like on their own side of midfield. And if you look at passing completion percentages, their overall percentages was 84% passes completed, but in the attacking half, that's 72%. So if law of averages, right? That means 92% or 94% of the passes that the Fire were completing were in their own defensive half. So they could not get out of their half. This also has to do with the formation. Like, Klopas played extremely conservative defensively, had 9-10 guys behind the ball most times. And we saw in Toronto I should say right after halftime, it looked like they really were just playing for a draw in TFC. And they transitioned to that. Okay, let's get that point on the road and get to the next match. Where here, that's like how they started the match was, hey, let's play for a draw. And it was pretty obvious that the Fire were looking to do that, or maybe just steal a point. They started in a 5-4-1 formation. And of course, it's Shabilko who's up top and Koutsias is the winger. If you would have learned anything from that TFC game, you should have had Koutsias be up top. And what's crazy here is I think this is just a product of the way the subs work in and out on the graphics. Is the graphic actually shows Gaston Jimenez subbing in for Shabilko as striker. Clearly, that's not the case, that Kai Kamara moved up to that top spot. But it is just kind of funny to see that on MLSsoccer.com. Now, getting back to the statistics, here's the disheartening one. 6 shots. Throughout the entire game, only 6 shots. 0 shots on goal. We talked about it maybe 3-4 weeks ago, that the Chicago Fire at that time actually had one of the best conversion rates, that their goal scored per shots on target was at like 53%. And it was one of the highest, if not the highest in the league at that time. So for every 2 shots the Fire were putting on goal, they were scoring one of them. not terrible. You can generate some offensive opportunities, but then that has been the refrain all season, and it has never been more obvious in this match. They go to a 5-4-1, they play ultra defensive, and they don't generate one shot on goal. Not a counterattack, not off a set piece or corner, not off a bad turnover and a breakaway, nothing. No shots on goal. That's the issue with this team. And that, my friends, is why anyone who's been really high on Frank Klopas to this point is going to have a reality check, especially after this game. 418 total passes. We talked about that in the percentages. The Fire did have 22 crosses. So again, they're launching balls into the box, but when you're playing a 5-4-1 and you're preaching to the team, don't give up anything, you're going to have maybe one guy in the box in a position to get a head on it or turn it on a frame. Not the case. No shots on goal, despite 22 crosses. 4 offsides, so at least they were trying to push up a little bit there. 46 duels won, 10 tackles won, so close to Cincinnati, but getting the edge there. 3 yellow cards. Obviously, you're in a game like this, you're gonna see the yellow cards come. The Haile Selassie one, I think he probably could have done better than to shove the Cincinnati defender. Like, that's when you just get up in the face of the other player. You don't actually turn around and shove him, though I can understand his frustration and being bodied off of that by a much bigger and much more physical player. However, don't shove the guy. It makes it an easy call. He did embellish the push. There's no doubt about that. But you don't shove the guy and give the referee the easy opportunity to give you a yellow. And who knows if they think a finger gets up and hits the guy in the chin and that's contact to the head and you're ejected. So not a good play by Haile Selassie. And honestly, I also think Herbers ended up with he did not end up with the yellow card. See, that's just where my head goes. It was Suke and Shaqiri also with yellows, and Shaqiri gets his yellow, I think 6 minutes after he came into the match for arguing with the referee. Again, poor discipline, not smart. So those are the statistics, and it did kind of match up with the eye test. It was just pure defense, no offense, nothing going for the Fire. And even if you look at Frank Klopas' quote sheet, and you go on the Chicago Fire's website to check that out, he used to talk about tactical analysis and, how he's changing formations, this and that. This was much more of we didn't have it this week. Like, he admitted that with the 3 days between the last few games, they're not even working on tactics. They're just trying to recover and get healthy and get fit for the next match. So that is a big thing where you can see the coaching staff's where their head's at. But Wyatt Ohmsberg, great to see him get quoted here. Here's what he says on the team's mentality and how he thinks they brought it over a full 90 minutes. Again, despite giving up a goal in the last 10, 15 minutes of the game, as the Fire have been known to do. I think now it's 15 drop points from leading positions. Ohmsberg says, I thought it was pretty good. We had a really good game plan. We didn't have much time to prepare when we were on the road. So a lot of it was just video based. Again, giving more credit to Klopas, saying we were just trying to recover. But went into the game of a good idea of how to play and more specifically how to defend. Acosta is a great player for them, and we tried to limit him, and obviously he got free that one time and did well to score the goal. But I thought our game plan was really good, and as a unit, not just the defenders, but everybody, we were pretty aggressive, winning 50-50s, winning aerial duels, especially in the second half. We played pretty well and started to create more chances offensively. Giving the defender who's on the field the benefit of the doubt. You probably did play pretty well, and the stats bore out that, yes, you won more of these 50-50 challenges, the duels and the tackles, than you lost. But don't try to sell me, Wyatt, that you played pretty well and started to create more chances offensively. Don't even try to sell me on that. Now, that is all I want to talk about Cincinnati, because we have a U.S. Open Cup game coming up. And before we get into that, I want to remind everyone that our show is brought to you by Skira Icelandic Spring Water. Icelandic for clear, Skira comes from a government-protected nature preserve in Iceland. This water has a naturally low mineral content, and clearly, pun intended, it's the best. And I have had Skira. I have been to Iceland, and I will tell you, it is fantastic. The tap water in Iceland is so pure that it is better than our bottled water here in the States. So you need to go get yourself a bottle of Skira, or 2 or 4 or 6, depending on what you're going to be doing during this Houston US Open Cup game. And with that, we are going to hear now from our featured guest, John Donovan, on the podcast side of things. So if you're listening or watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and follow along on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, because we'll take a short break on YouTube. But on the podcast, take it away, John. John, thank you again for your contributions. And hopefully we can continue to talk about some positives. Maybe next week we'll talk about a positive. What do I mean, continue to talk about a positive? Brings me to my pet peeve is there were a lot of Fire fans on social media, on Twitter, saying, oh, well, there were a lot of positives in this game. Kendall Burks looked good, and Spencer Ritchie's playing well, and Shaqiri is into the game. Like, why are you taking positives against maybe one of your worst statistical performances, a loss on the road? It's Cincinnati, and they're the best team in the league, and we only lost 1-0 at Cincinnati. These are the same arguments that we've been making all season, and the Fire are in 12th place. You cannot take positives from that game. Well, we only lost by a goal to Philly. Well, we're drawing Atlanta and blah, blah. Yeah, you can't say that anymore. It has been how many games now? We're halfway through the season, and you cannot be taking moral victories, and you cannot be taking, look at the individual play. This one guy looks good. No, you can't do that anymore. It's time to win games. And there is no better time to do that now with the U.S. Open Cup match on Tuesday, June 6th, against the Houston Dynamo. This is the Chicago Fire's chance to actually do something meaningful this season. And everyone who is high on Klopas, and I'm very lukewarm, if not tepid, this is where they're saying he's going to shine in U.S. Open Cup. Prove it to me first, because he's been able to squeak by Chicago House early on, right? And then get the next couple of victories. Let's see, let me pull my bracket up here. Getting a 1-0 victory down in Austin, right? So the Fire, I can't say have had a memorable or impressive U.S. Open Cup run. They're still banged up. They're still eking by. And you know what? We'll just have to see if it plays out. It is an Open Cup. It's a knockout tournament. Anything can happen, right? And I think that's what we have to hope for, that there's a little bit of that Klopas chaos that's still left to propel them over Houston. Now, looking at Houston, here's their Open Cup run so far. They beat the Tampa Bay Rowdies 1-0 in Tampa Bay. They beat Kansas City 1-0 in Houston. They smoked Minnesota 4-0 in their last match, and now they are playing the Chicago Fire. So decent cup run by the Houston Dynamo, a team that I don't believe has a lot of big history in U.S. Open Cup, but a team that also has been struggling a little bit. They've had a little bit more of a bump lately, but a team that could also use this to kind of help their MLS season a little bit. Houston, as it stands currently, is sitting in 10th place on 17 points. They are 2 out of the playoff line. So you compare that to the Chicago Fire, who are sitting in 14th place on also 17 points, but the Fire are 4 points off the playoff line. So record-wise, points-wise, goals for and against kind of thing, kind of similar here for Houston and Chicago. And Houston, if you watched their MLS game in which they lost to St. Louis 3-0 on Saturday, also played a rotated squad. So they, a little bit at least. I don't think it had their full complement of starters. And to that aspect, Cincinnati also kind of rotated their squad a bit too, which just made the Chicago Fire Cincinnati game even more boring. So we had Houston kind of rotating, looking ahead. Chicago definitely rotating, looking ahead. And we will see what happens on this Tuesday night. Now, looking at some of the numbers here, recent run of form: Houston loss, win, draw. So they are not in the greatest run of form, but Chicago is coming in loss, draw, win, draw. So again, the Fire, we know the Fire. Team of ties, right? Drawing all the time. If you look at the last 3 matches between these two teams, it's been a little back and forth. Chicago played at Houston last June, 2-0 lost at Houston. Then the next match before that was in 2020, September of 2020. Chicago wins 4-0, and then in 2019, the Fire won in Houston 1-0. So honestly, I don't think any of those three results can have any sort of bearing on this match. They're different teams, it's different circumstances, but something that is neat to kind of look at historically speaking between these two teams and their overall matchup record. Fairly even. Chicago's won 8 times, Houston's won 12, and they have drawn 8 times. I'm not sure what to expect out of this matchup other than chaos, because we have two teams in different conferences who are playing different styles. I expect Klopas to keep a 4-man backline depending on the health of his players, because that seems to be what everyone is most comfortable with, and provide the most cover for some of your struggling defenders. If Dean and Aceves are going to be back, if Dean is a little healthy, maybe he gets a little bit of a run out towards the end of the game just to bring some fresh legs in if they shift to a defensive formation. Or you may just see everyone got to put in a shift and dig deep. If that's the case, I'm not optimistic. However, we have seen Jairo Torres come back from a little bit to get in a little bit more games and get some more minutes. Maybe he has a bigger role to play in this U.S. Open Cup game. I still would like to see Shabilko with Koutsias, or Kamara with Koutsias, in more of a dual striker or a one-and-one striker. I think Koutsias is much better as a striker than a winger, despite him having a great work rate. But I expect this to be a little sloppy, a little chaotic, and I hope the Chicago Fire can get some goals on the counter. And that is where I will leave it. We will have a follow-up show, hopefully out by Thursday, recapping this match and looking ahead to the weekend. I'm not even going to say the team for this weekend, because we got to focus in on Houston, and that's what the Fire need to do. And I think that's what they've been doing, because you've seen how lackluster their last couple of games were. I will leave you with the last little bit of news. If you haven't seen, LAFC lost the Champions League final, the CONCACAF Champions League final, to León of Liga MX, 3-1 on aggregate. They lost 2-1 in León and then 1-0 in LA just last night. So disappointing for the LAFC club, disappointing for MLS to not go back-to-back in CONCACAF Champions League. And the last little bit of Fire news, Xherdan Shaqiri has been named to Switzerland's national team roster for Euro 2024 qualifiers. So congratulations to the Chicago Fire for not letting our youth players go to their Under-20 World Cup, but for allowing Xherdan Shaqiri to go play in the Euro qualifiers. I'm going to let that sink in for a minute. I have to wonder if he's got a clause in his contract that says he gets to decide and gets to go do those sort of things. But I, and especially when Switzerland is playing the likes of Belarus, Israel, Andorra, Kosovo, and Romania, like, they definitely need their top player here, right? Anyway, that's all we have for today, folks. Hope you enjoyed the show. Follow along on social media at Glasshouse Soccer, and hopefully we can talk about a Chicago Fire team that advances in the U.S. Open Cup in the next episode. Go out and get a bottle of Skira Icelandic spring water at your local 7-Eleven. And until then, till the next one, let's go Fire.